For those of you about to watch Eternity in a Day for the first time, or an Angelopoulos film for the first time, I'd like to give a few suggestions of what to look for. For those of you who are seeing this and have seen other Angelopoulos films, I think you'll find Eternity in a Day pulls together a lot of what Theo Angelopoulos has done over a 35-year career. Again, for those of you seeing your first Angelopoulos movie with this, I'm particularly thinking of you in the 5 major points I want to make, which are briefly the way Angelopoulos pulls together history, myth, and the present all mixed up in an unusual and clever way that sticks with you in many ways. Second, he is committed to the whole concept of Homer's Odyssey, life as a journey, and we'll say more about that. Third would be the incredible visual sense that his films have. He is so far away from what a Hollywood film does, and we'll say a lot more about that. There are images you will not be able to forget, and we each have different ones. It's important, I think, in any film, but particularly with Angelopoulos afterward, to say, so, what image are you remembering, and what is it about that image that's sticking with you and to you? And fourth, he's considered a postmodern filmmaker. We'll say a bit more about what that means, which includes how he's making films in a very quote-unquote European, un-Hollywood way. We should pay some tribute to that. And finally, the sense of triumph, of some sense of hope that he offers. Not a Hollywood happy ending, but a sense of a coming together and a triumph of understanding and acceptance that is part of what he's offering in 1998 when this film came out and won the big award, the Palme d'Or, at the Cannes Film Festival, with the award being handed to him, by the way, by Martin Scorsese, who is one of his many fans. In Eternity in a Day, which was made in '97, released in '98, let's put that, in, first of all, in a historical context. That means that the Balkan-Bosnian wars were over, but Kosovo had just been happening. So there was all of this turmoil going on that, of course, affected Greece greatly, too, being a member of NATO, plus being on the border of all of these countries. The location, by the way, is Thessaloniki. It is the story of a poet in the second largest city, which is in the north and therefore closer to the borders of Turkey, Bulgaria, former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. Our 2 main characters in the story are a poet, aging poet who is dying. He is setting about his last day before he goes into the hospital to end his life. And he runs into an Albanian refugee Greek speaker. What we have in presenting these 2 characters is both a real actor, Bruno Ganz, a Swiss actor who's been in many films in Europe, plays the aging poet, and yet at the same time this says a lot about Angelopoulos, that he uses a real Albanian Greek-speaking refugee to play the boy. Yes, he's happy using real actors for some of the big roles, and yet he likes to use non-actors for important roles too. Achilleos, the real name of the little boy, who actually was from Albania. The script was partially written on the kinds of experiences he had. What is it like to cross illegally, of course, into Greece and try to live? Greece now has 10 million people and almost 1 million Albanians living in Greece. Here is Angelopoulos in 1997-98 giving us, without a lecture, giving us a reality to Greece at that time and continuing today, of course, that you have hundreds of thousands of Albanian refugees coming into Greece. Other countries around the world are dealing with the same thing. America, we deal with Chicanos coming across the border. Choose your European country. Holland has 1 million Muslims. France, the same thing. The new Europe is not only a unified Europe, but it's a Europe that's having to deal with refugees. And once again, without hitting us over the head, Angelopoulos is acknowledging this reality. The poet who is dying is trying to finish up unfinished business in his life, personal and poetic. he takes on the job of trying to finish a poem by a 19th century poet who didn't finish some of his poems. This is kind of a nice touch, and a little background is the poet that is mentioned is a real poet, Solomos. Solomos lived in the 19th century and lived on one of the Greek-Italian islands. He spoke both languages, and he was trying to brush up his Greek and Finnish poems. One of his poems became the Greek national anthem. There's a scene where our dying poet is walking along the river with the little boy, and he talks about the 19th century poet. And then in a single shot, we move into seeing the actual poet sitting in the 19th century working on his poetry. Now in Hollywood, you would cut, you would make it a flashback, you would do something like that. Not for Angelopoulos. It's as if the present has the past in it, and he's telling you that in one visual shot. And he himself feels, if you live in Greece, I mean, what is it like to drive your Toyota past the Acropolis every day? I mean, past and present join in unusual ways, and he lets us think about it through the films he makes. Angelopoulos' fascination with the Odyssey is that we are all looking for a home. It's what home are we looking for? And the whole concept of the Odyssey is that it's after the war, or whatever the big battle is that you've had in life. In this case, Alexander is Odysseus. He's about to return home, which is the end of his life, so Ithaca is death in that sense. His Penelope is his wife, who is already deceased, Anna. And in a number of images of the film, he, in the present, joins with his wife, who in the past. So once again, past and present are joined in his Odyssey, his version. Ithaca, the homecoming, isn't necessarily a place. It isn't necessarily an island. It can be a state of being inside, in which you reach your own sense of peace. The fact that the main character is a poet is important too. In several of Angelopoulos' films, his main characters have been filmmakers. But I think it says a lot that in his 11th film, the main character is a poet, because Angelopoulos himself has told me that really what he began to be and wanted to be in life was a poet. But then with a smile, he said, I could never be as good as I wanted to be as a poet, so I became a filmmaker. And he's become certainly an excellent one. But one of his favorite poets, besides Homer, is the modern Greek poet, George Seferis, who one of his main poems is broken into a number of parts, and it is about a contemporary Odyssey in the 20th century. And Seferis' poems deal with the journey towards home that took place in the 1920s, when there was an exchange of populations between Turkey and Greece, when 2 million Greeks were sent out of Turkey and into Greece, and they were on their own Odyssey. Seferis, the poet, was one of them. He came from the Turkish coast, where there were many Greek cities, and homeless, in a sense, trying to find a home. And the last line of this Odyssey series that Seferis has is one that Angelopoulos likes to quote a lot. "Ke emis που δεν είχαμε τίποτα θα τους διδάξουμε την ειρήνη, and we who had nothing shall teach them peace." And so that modern poem is echoed really in Angelopoulos' films. Now, talking about the Odyssey for Angelopoulos in this case, if Odysseus' son is Telemachus, in Homer, the son is on a mission to find his father, and they finally reunite towards the end. In a sense, we have, again, Angelopoulos plays with this idea because our poet, Alexander, the main character, has no son, and his family isn't paying attention to him. And so the one of the few strong relationships he has in the film is with this Albanian Greek-speaking boy who is more like a grandson. So once again, this is Angelopoulos playing with Homer and forming a new relationship. And this is what Angelopoulos does in all of his films. There is that echo. Once again, it's not that Ithaca is going to be a beautiful, rich island. This echoes another poem that is important to the Greeks by Cavafy, a poet from Alexandria, Egypt, called Ithaca. And the last lines of that poem are, when you reach Ithaca, if you find that it is, I'm paraphrasing, that it's poor, Ithaca has not deceived you. Ithaca has given you the journey, the voyage. And Angelopoulos' film is absolutely that way. Each film is a voyage. This is the voyage of the end of a life of the poet. Hollywood films have gotten faster and faster and faster with editing. MTV, television, everything has contributed to that, so that a classical film like Casablanca may be 450 shots, whereas contemporary films out of Hollywood average between 3,000 and 4,000 and more shots. That means that the average scene shot in a Hollywood film these days is about 3 to 4 seconds. The scene in which the poet and the young boy are walking along the river, and the poet explains the 19th century poet, Solomos, and then the camera tracks along the river and we actually see the poet. That is one shot. It lasts 4 minutes and 45 seconds. And this is a special kind of filmmaking. It means that you're committed to letting us see the countryside, the environment, and experience it, because it's not cutting so quickly as we are used to. This is also a statement that Angelopoulos is making about who he is and the kind of filmmaking he's making. That is, he realizes that we all live in a world of iPods and cell phones and TV and MTV and distraction, and he's really saying the opposite. Slow down. Let's watch. Let the scene play out. And there are two kinds of audiences. You can say, no, I'm committed to my iPod and my cell phone and my fast editing, and I don't want to watch this. Fine. But so many people who see Angelopoulos movies say, whoa, thank you. I've got a chance to watch things that I wouldn't normally see. Add to that his style is deep focus, that is, everything's in focus, and it tends to be long shot or medium shot, so that you are taking in the characters in their environment. It's important to see nature. It's important to see the border in snow with the fence, with what look like frozen children on the fence trying to escape. Saying that Angelopoulos is committed to shooting the other Greece means that, once again, it's not sunshine, but he's capturing a different kind of beauty. Winter, dark skies, that's what it is for many Greeks and a lot of the year. And then scenes that we wouldn't see otherwise. Yes, we're used to headlining news, but even our TV news is just very quickly edited and so forth. Here, once again, in the film, you get a real problem. Not just the refugees, but the selling of children. There is a huge market around the world of European and American parents, because of the low birth rate in Greece and Europe and America, wanting to buy children. And once again, the length of the scenes, so that you don't have a voiceover newscaster telling you how horrible this is or anything. No, you as an audience are experiencing it and realizing, whoa, this must be going on. So a lot of the film takes place in the mind of Alexander, our dying poet, and our flashbacks, our dreams, and these are very bright. The reality he lives in is dark, winterish, but the dreams are happy. And again, the visual style, it's summertime, it's bright, his wife is there. And that becomes part of the film too. Unfinished business, he didn't love enough, so he's trying to reconcile that. But again, the visual style is important. postmodern is a term that's used a lot in talking about him. That means that he's not telling you a story in the way you're usually used to seeing it. Hollywood believes in beginning, middle, and an end. The French director Godard once said, yes, I believe in beginning, middle, and end, but not necessarily in that order. Angelopoulos would multiply that, and because it's a film about dreams and reality and a mixture even within the same scene of history and so forth, you are not getting a story presented in the way that most would. But yet there are all kinds of interesting links. I'm not suggesting that this is alienating, and in fact it's intriguing in different ways. There's a wonderful circularity to the film, for instance, that it begins with a boy's voice calling out to Alexander as a child to come play by the sea.
Alexander, vamos στα νησί. Πού? Στο νησί.
And we follow a scene down to the sea, and the whole film begins and ends at the sea. And Angelopoulos himself says, this is Greece. We are a nation by the sea. On one hand, we have stark alienation and loneliness. When we see our poet waking up at the beginning of the film, he is alone except for his housekeeper, who's leaving him. The only connection he has with someone else is suddenly we hear music playing across the street in another apartment. And then it stops, and he starts the music. And we have two neighbors who've never met each other playing the same tune to each other. And then we see him walking his dog along the seacoast in Thessaloniki, this northern Greek city. And he's saying to himself, and therefore to us, which makes the film very personal, should I try to meet this stranger, what would he, she be like? And he leaves it. No, it's better to leave this kind of mystery that we have. In a film that begins with extreme loneliness, there are a number of scenes that celebrate community, a sense of a group that gets on and celebrates itself. Alexander brings his dog to give to his support woman who had been helping him. The son of the lady is having a wedding, is getting married, in the street. And they're doing this incredible dance that you have to know is called Pontiko. It's a Greek community culture from the Black Sea, that particular kind of dance. Anytime anyone sees that particular dance, they will know that's where these people are from. So what Angelopoulos is doing is creating a sense of community in the street, and it's a wedding. That's important. That's not a funeral, it's a wedding. There is this sense of hope that goes through this film that on one hand looks dark in the sense of there are so many things wrong, there are these refugees, and yet you end the film with a sense of hope. He is dying, but he has reconnected. He is finishing. The boy has touched him and is moving on. Solomos, the poet, didn't finish many of his poems, and he did try to learn more Greek by paying money for words he didn't know. So our modern poet, Alexander, several scenes in the film, tells our young Albanian refugee, I will give you money for words I don't know. And there are some wonderful scenes where the boy tells him some words. And one of them is a word he hasn't heard, exilis, which means, the boy tells Alexander, means someone who is in exile anywhere they are. And our poet comes to feel that's what I am. I am in exile from my life, from my culture, from my family, and from my wife who I did not love enough. And by the end of the film, he has gotten past that exile phase. He is connecting. He is finding his Ithaca. P.S. those who love to look for small details, of course we know The Simpsons rewards paying close attention for reruns. If you're looking for Angelopoulos himself, he does his wink in a Hitchcockian way and appears in the cafe scene before they go down by the river. So he walks after the four soldiers. Look for that scene. I would mention, finally, the film historian David Thompson, in his biographical dictionary of film, talks about Angelopoulos, and he says, cinema's over 100 years old now, and if we have to talk about the important directors who are still alive, there are only a few, and he mentions a few, Martin Scorsese and a few others, and Angelopoulos. He doesn't mention Spielberg or many of the others you would think about. He says Theo Angelopoulos is in that small group of the important filmmakers. What we need, Thompson says, is to be able to see his films because they really are not out yet in good form. So the fact that you're seeing this on DVD is a movement in the right direction.